Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Let's talk about math and taxes. All right, so when it comes to taxes, they're all about that money, and when it comes to money, you can't have money without math, right? The existence of money is dependent on math. So let's get into it. So for reference, I'm from the States, and when I'm thinking about some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this video, I'm going to talk about them in relation to the States. But it's worth noting that no matter where you go, if you're dealing with taxes, you're dealing with math, right? So yeah, let's get into it. So for starters, I'd say like when it comes to taxes, like this like they manage to be as complex as people think they are, and yet not. Let me explain. I think in theory, they're not as complex as people think that they are. However, they get bogged down in government speak, and we're not really taught how to do them. But let's get into the math and then kind of circle around back to that. So when it comes to like just looking at the idea of taxable income, how do we even get there, right? So there are complexities to it, but you might generally say it's the idea that it's like your taxable income is your actual income minus, like the standard deduction, which I think was around 12,000 at the time of recording, but I could be mistaken because I did my taxes like a few months ago. But like I said, there are complexities, right? There might be like itemized deductions that you can do. You can choose from that list. So your situation may be different, right? Because you may be in school, you may have got given some money away to charity. There may be some other specialized situation that gave you a list of itemized deductions that you can use in lieu of the standardized deduction. But the idea is that you're taking away the deduction or set of deductions from, you know, your actual income. So that's the idea in principle. Again, there are complexities and the specifics may vary. But so that's the general for the taxable like income, and then there's the idea of like the tax rate, which that's going to be determined by whatever your income bracket is, right? And the idea of the income brackets or that they're the idea that hey, there's certain cutoffs that you're going to be taxed at different rates. And the idea is that like our system over here in the States is supposed to be progressive in the sense that if you're lower income, you're supposed to be taxed at lower levels. Where if you're making higher income, it's supposed to be progressively taxed higher. And the idea is, for instance, if you're making like 10,000 or below, for instance, maybe it's just like a flat rate of 10% of your income. Whereas you have to do a whole bunch of like basic algebra, but still like some work to do other stuff because it might be like, oh well, you're taking a percentage of this and you're adding a certain rate, and you're doing something else with this other part of it. And I'll leave like a link in the description to give you an idea of how these sort of things go. Like, because the IRS does like give you an idea on their site about some of this stuff. So like I'll leave that, and if I can find something else that's interesting, I'll leave that information there too. But my whole thing is like there's a lot of math involved in all this, right? Because there's the idea that hey, for starters, you're dealing with money, right? And you're dealing with the government wanting a percentage of your money, right? And how that's determined is very mathematical in nature, right? They're figuring out these formulas to take out parts of your money. And there's certain tricks that you can play with that, right? Like certain things that you can do to maybe not owe as much. And then there's the idea that like throughout the year, you're having you're getting portions of your money taken out anyway, right? Like you're owing to the state, you're owing to the federal government as well. And that's depending on how many exemptions you take out. There's math in that too. It can get complicated in a sense because there's a lot going on, but the math behind it isn't that bad. But a lot of it is not explained to us growing up, and that baffles me because it's just like we do all this stuff, right? We get to algebra. We don't get that grounded in the algebra, but like even if we're gonna go the route that we're gonna go, it's still crazy that we go that route in our country, right? Because you realize at a certain point, in certain places, you don't have to go past algebra. Like, or in some cases, I guess like algebra two, it's one of the two. But the idea is like you don't have to go past some algebra. But instead of just stopping, what we could do is we could have a class that covers things like taxes, something that people are going to have to deal with, or balancing your bank account, budgeting, things like that. And there could also be something that also like gets across how math is being used in other segments of your life, because right, we use it in things like food, we use it in things like music and in gaming and in all that, but we don't. But it's crazy that we don't deal with taxes because we're just kind of thrown into that. And assuming you don't have parents that will help you along with that, you're kind of like left to drift because you're probably not going to get that in school. Like I was teaching this one class like a few years back where it was centered around application, and when I got to the taxes section, that was the one where the students were the most lit up about, and that's wild to me. But like I get it, right? Because it's just like we don't cover math that you'll use in the traditional sense. Like everything that we cover, like in the algebra class and stuff like that, you use in the abstract sense, right? It's just like we're learning things that are useful. We're learning things that you'll be using in theory, but like there's a good chance that you're not going to be consciously doing the stuff that you're doing in that class, and I can admit that. But like it's wild to me that we don't try to make it more practical, that we don't try to like reset where we're at, and that you can again, and I can't stress this enough, you can go through to your K to 12 and stop at algebra and not have to go further. And even if you do, you're still not going to get classes where you learn basic things like budgeting, like balancing your account and doing taxes. But back to taxes, like it's supposed to change. Is rates do, right? Is your income does, and it's kind of like wild how that goes. But my whole thing is like, right, it's all over the place, and who's determining the rules, right? Like that depends on who's in those positions of power, and that depends on who's in office and who's voting them in, right? And there's math and all that and how it works, and then you gotta figure like who's actually making the decisions to keep the current rules versus changing them, right? Because you can vote people in, but then those people are voting on larger decisions, and there's math and all of that, and it's just kind of wild how it goes because it's just like there's a lot that we can't do in our regular lives with it, but it's just like there's a lot that some people know and they can game the system, and it's wild. But one of the other things that I want to talk about, because I don't want this video to be too long, is the idea that there are tax preparation companies and individuals that benefit from preparing taxes, right? And there's math in that, right? Because now there's not only math in the taxes that they're preparing, but there's math in the money they're making for preparing those taxes. And like for the individuals, I gotta imagine there's nothing too scandalous about that. They're just doing their thing. They're putting their skills to good work. But for the record, you don't have to go to a person. You don't even have to go to a company. You can follow them yourselves. You can figure that out. But you might feel safer going to a person or a company, or it could be more convenient. And I get that, and I understand that. But just know that you could. The possibility is there. And I'm not saying that you have to or that you should. Just know that you could. But then when it comes to the companies, it's kind of diabolical because some people want to make tax prep easier, but there are some people who have vested interest in making it horribly inconvenient and not getting it across that a lot of it is basic algebra. Because it's like, I feel like a lot of tax stuff, like a lot of tax wording and things surrounding it, are needlessly confusing. It's not the math that's actually confusing, just like from my perspective, because it's all just algebra, really, like in arithmetic, right? Like, so really, to me, it's the language, it's how it's used, it's the terminology. It's just like a lot of obscure stuff that shouldn't be obscure because it affects our lives. So that's where I'm at, though. There's a lot of math and taxes. It's like how they exist in the first place, because you got that money, and you got the government wanting to take part of your money, and how all those rules are determined, right? There's math in all of it. and how it gets to you, and there's math in prepping it, and how much money you're paying to get that prep, and how much time that you put into like prepping them versus how much time you might save from getting someone else to do it, and the trade-off from the time saved and the convenience factor in, like, paying. And there's also a convenience factor to consider, because when you're preparing yourself, because you might know what you're doing, but it might also take you the time to do that, and you might be okay with the time that it takes to do it, but you might not feel like going through the trouble of following it yourself. You got to figure out what you want to do for you, but just know that the potential is there. You can file your taxes if you wanted to. If you did the research, you can figure it out. Know that you have the capability, and know that if you're confused by taxes, it's okay. It's kind of designed to be that way. Yeah, I said what I said. But know that it's not like the math. That's not the problem. It's the terminology. It's like the very esoteric nature of it. It's all of that. So yeah, that's what I have to say for this video. There's a lot of math and taxes. Be sharp, be aware. Math is everywhere, in and everything. Boost your number sense.